Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sabbath at Midnight. I am your host, Lionel Tavares, here with my co-host, Dominic. And today, our guests by the name of Leslie and Stephen Shaw. We're going to be discussing their book and pretty much everything that got them to go down this path. We're going to let them just take the mic over and just tell us, what happened, how they got to where they're at today, their beliefs, stuff like that. But before we get into that, I just want to give a little bit of information on their book. And it is called Who They Are and What They Are Up To. So just a little bit about this book. I'm reading it right here from Amazon, so you can get it on Amazon. And at least, and this is the start, quote, at least 10,000 UFO sightings are reported each year. Why are they visiting us so often? Utilizing decades of research and study in ancient history, ufology, human evolution, and even Tibetan Buddhism, Leslie and Stephen Shaw have woven together a fact-driven, eye-opening, and intriguing account of mankind's true history and attempt to answer all the most important questions about the UFOs. Common curiosities include, who's flying them? That's something I want to know too. Where are they hiding? Where do they come from? What do they want? Why are they abducting people? Why are they slaughtering livestock? What do they have? What do they have a human hybrid breeding system connected to their research? Yeah, basically, why do they have a hybrid? That's something I've asked a lot myself. So, and right here at the end, I see this one here. Did giants really exist? Did the Great Flood really happen? Were the Anunnaki involved in our evolution? That's another one that I would really like to hear your side of it too. So it already sounds good. So that's their book, quick description. So without further ado, Leslie and Stephen, whoever wants to go first, take it away and just tell us a little bit about yourself and go ahead.
Well, hi. Thanks so much for having us. Stephen's experiences started when he was a baby or a child, so I'll let him start.
Yes, thank you, Leslie. Hi, this is Stephen. My first experiences started when I was 3 years old. I was living with my parents at Fallbrook Avenue, which is in Woodland Hills, Southern California. And the first experiences that I would have would be this invisible creature that would wake me up when I was 3 years old, that would be jumping on my stomach and then my chest, kind of playfully, but it was definitely jumping on me. Okay, and I just kind of thought it was just like a friend or something like that. I didn't think much about it. I was raised in a family that we were told from day one that we had this family spirit guy called O'Glegley that would show up and help people from time to time. This is going back to England and even Germany, going back 3 generations. So I was raised, we were a closed family from the standpoint that we kind of kept things to ourselves. I didn't tell my friends about the strange things that were happening. They would think I was weird. I mean, it was just something you didn't talk about. So fast forward to when I was 9 or 10 years old, we had a bunk bed at that point. My brother and I would sleep on the top of the bunk, my brother on the bottom, and I was awakened by this strange sound. It was not the dog. I could tell it wasn't the dog. So I carefully climbed out of my bunk bed, and I was walking down the hallway, and my heart was pounding. My heart was literally, I was like, my adrenaline was up. I knew something wasn't right, and I did not know what I was going to see. And I just about ready to turn the corner into the living room, and then it all just goes black. And then I wake up back in my bed some hours later. I can't remember whether it's 2 or 3. And somehow I don't know, like, did I climb back into my bed when I was sleepwalking? No. Number one, my adrenaline was up and my heart was pounding, so I know I was awake. Again, no memory about what happened.
The family experiences these kinds of things all the time. They were experiencing, they'd see something strange and then black out. And that was the common theme. And
well, my brother who was 6 years older than me, he started sleeping in the closet in our room, and I said, Philip, why are you sleeping in the closet? He said, the little men, they scare me at night when they come. And so, again, my brother, he also had a bedwetting problem too at the time too. So it was like, maybe I thought, well, maybe it's because of them. I said, no, it's the little men. And actually, I saw the little men myself once when I was really young.
And one time Philip saw a gray alien standing in his room
at a different house.
At a different house. And I believe he said he was 16 at the time.
Yes.
And he saw it and then immediately blacked out again. And then another time he heard scrabbling on the floor and thought it was a cat, and he reached down to pet the cat, and a hand grabbed his arm instead, and it wasn't a cat. And again, he blacked out instantly. It seems like this is a common, again and again and again, they'd see something strange and then black out. And
during that same time period, when he was like 15, 16, he saw 2 white UFOs outside of his window, and we were living, the house that we built, my dad and my brother and myself, ourselves, because I was a cabinet maker, my dad was a master cabinet maker from England. So we built this house, and it was in the woods, and it wasn't like there was a street next door or anything like that. It was definitely in the woods, and these 2 white UFOs were outside his bedroom window, and then of course he blacks out again.
Mm-hmm.
My brother was very reticent about talking about his early life. I tried before he died. I tried on several occasions to try and get him to talk about when he was going to elementary school, and when he was younger. He says, I don't know. I don't have much memory of my early life, and which I found very strange, because my brother was. He was a draftsman and engineer, and he taught calculus at the college level for fun. So he was a brilliant man, but he was not
disturbed most of his life. Yeah,
but he never had proper relationships. He was very, very much a hermit, and a big guy too, 6'3.5", about 350. So
and he came to a tragic end in the family, unfortunately.
December 1st of 2017, he killed both his cats. Then he took a shotgun to my mom, blew her head off, and then he blew his head off.
And we think it was partly because of this early trauma in his life.
He was getting very paranoid toward the end. He set up cameras all throughout the house. He thought that I was living on the property, which I was 550 miles away. He thought all these crazy things, and he started hearing noises like I've been hearing all throughout my life. I think he started to be approached, or he just basically lost it, from all the stress throughout his life. And he just couldn't take it anymore. So between losing my dad and my mom and my brother and Leslie's father and our dog, within
all in the same year,
all in about a 6-month period time, it was like, wow, do you want to give somebody else something else? My sister's still alive. She's a ghost hunter with her husband.
Yeah, in England,
in northern England. So,
but then his sister, his father, and himself, Stephen, also had when you were 18, I believe
18 was the big one.
They had a long week of bizarre occurrences.
This again happened at the Fallbrook house. It will sound strange, but I'll just tell you exactly what happened. The first night, my dad, again, British conservative from England, right? He came to me that morning and said, Steve, my closet doors open and closed on me during the night? And I thought, well, sure, Dad, so I didn't think too much of it, but he swore that they did. Next night, I decided to, for whatever reason, I was reading a lot of Paramahansa Yogananda stuff at the time, autobiography of a yogi, and I gave my dad's little book called Metaphysical Meditation, and I said, Dad, you should read some of this stuff. So I gave it to him, and I went back to my room. About 9:30, he came back into my room and said, Stephen, with this curious look on his face, he said, Stephen, am I hearing things? Come into the living room. I said, okay. And he said, do you hear a silver bell? I said, yes. He says, it's coming from inside the wall next to the chimney. So we both listened. There was this distinct silver bell being rung inside the wall, not in the chimney, but in the 2x4 wall next to it. So then we said, are we both hearing things? So he said, let's get Karen, my sister. Karen wanted to have nothing to do with the spiritual type stuff or this.
At the time, anyway.
At the time, she was just like turning. She said, I don't want to know anything about it. So we got her, and sure enough, she said, that's a silver bell. And okay, so we started knocking on the wall and pounding on the wall, and it went on for a good 10, maybe 15 minutes, and then it just stopped. The funny thing was, my mother and my brother were living in the house we were building up in Sonora, California, which is 335 miles away. And at that same time, My brother says my mom picked up the phone. My mom says that she heard this ringing sound, so she picked up the phone. My brother said that the phone never rang, and she heard this disembodied voice on the other side, saying something like, "I am the invisible on Beachy." I don't know what she actually heard, but my brother swears that the phone didn't ring. My mom picked up at the same time we were having the stuff happening at the Fallbrook house. Okay, now this is starting to get pretty weird, right? So the next night, I decided to sleep on the bottom of the bunk bed in my room, and I was awakened in the middle of the night with this sound in the air. Now, the kitchen light was on, so I could kind of see down the hallway, and there was no bugs, there was no cats, I thought, oh, I must be hearing things. So I went to go back to sleep. I rolled on my left side to go back to sleep, and then the bed was pushed 2 times from the base, 2 distinct pushes. And now we live in Southern California, so I thought, well, maybe it was a mini earthquake or something, trying to rationalize. So then, okay, I continued to try and go back to sleep, and then it pushes twice again, harder. Okay, and then I'm getting a little bit nervous here at this point, but said, okay, just don't pay attention. And then it pushes harder the 3rd time. And then I get 3 distinct taps on my right shoulder. Tap, tap, tap. Just like somebody has their index finger tapping on my shoulder. At this point, I'm annoyed and scared, and I'm thinking, okay. So I just roll over quickly to my right side and say, what? And there was nothing there, and then I black out. So after that happened, I didn't want to sleep in that room anymore. I thought, I'm not sleeping. I don't know what's happening. So I decided to sleep the next day on the sofa in the living room. I just went to bed in my cabinet making clothes, and I didn't care. It was 2 guys and my sister living, so I didn't bother putting on pajamas. So anyway, I woke up this was mid-January of 1979, so I was 18 years of age. I looked at my piano, thinking about what piano music I was going to play that day, and I listened to the fountain in the other room. So I was awake, I was alert, wasn't in any type of hypnagogic state, and from behind me, from the front door, it's like this being was waiting for me to wake up or become alert. This being, about 6 to 7 feet tall, blue-white, slender, moved toward me in about a second and a half, like it was gliding or walking really quickly, but more like gliding vertically. And it stopped by my right side. The whole room became filled up with blue-white, intense blue-white light. It was important. It was blue-white, not white, not blue, but blue-white. And it literally paralyzed the right side of my body. You could take like a knife down from my head down to my groin into my leg, the whole right side of my body. I could not move. The left side, I still had feeling in, but the right side was paralyzed. Not in a scary way, but I could not move. That's scary enough. And I think, oh God, I'm going to see the family spirit guide, Old Glegley, that I've heard about since being a kid. But then the other part of my brain said, hey, dude, you can't move. So I was really wanting to look at it. It bent down and it said into my ear, "Hi, Steve." Kind of in a ghostly whisper, but it was definitely from outside. It wasn't in my head. And I was thinking to myself, well, I can't move my lips. I can't say anything. And I was just waiting there for something to happen. And it left in, I don't know, 10 or 15, maybe 20 seconds. And then to this day, I cannot remember whether I told my dad right away, whether I went to his bedroom and said, you won't believe what happened.
Yeah, another memory lapse.
What I do know is 6 hours later, it was 11:30. It was lunchtime, and I decided to go get some food. We liked to going Jack in the Box at that point, right? So I reached into my right-hand side pocket of the same clothes I was wearing, and I pulled all the coins out to see what I had, and I had some coins and nails in that pocket, and swear to God, all the coins were magnetized. These are just regular American coins, not anything special, not like a special dime from 1945.
But he could pick them
or
up
some other country. This is
the nails and the
my
coins together.
My dad and I looked at each other and we said, no, that's not possible.
It's not supposed to be possible because American coins are specifically designed not to be magnetizable because they have to go in Pepsi machines and cigarette machines.
So the mistake we both made, because we were working on a job, we didn't think at the time to say, hey, get a camera
to record it.
Okay, so we didn't do that, unfortunately. This is 79 anyway. But the last thing that happened was that the next night, my dad was awakened by seeing this intense blue-white light outside of my bedroom doorway, and he was going to get up and investigate. And this voice came in his head, said, "Jeffrey, nothing to worry about. Go back to sleep. Everything's okay." And I have absolutely no memory. I have no memory of being awakened by an entity that particular night. It's like I have no idea what they were doing at that time or what they intended to do or what. So that was a very, very weird week. I mean, other things have happened since then, of course, but that was
nothing of that scale.
Well,
at the same time.
Once your coins are magnetized, that should not be magnetized, and I've tried to duplicate it myself with really, really strong magnets and electricity, and I don't know what they hit me with.
It sounds like he was exposed to a very powerful electromagnetic field.
I have no idea what it was, but it was still intact 6 hours after the event. That's all I can tell you. And
then Stephen's seen 5 UFOs, and the 2 that we saw, his last 2 were we were together, and those were my only 2. But the first one that I saw, where we were together, we were driving home late at night, and looking up in the windshield ahead of us, there was a bright white light in the distance. And it got brighter and brighter. And I thought, well, maybe it's a plane coming into Palm Springs Airport. But it didn't have the running lights like planes do. It was just a solid, round, white light. And it just seemed to hover there. And we were hurtling towards it at 65 miles an hour. So it seemed to be slowly getting larger and larger. And then suddenly it streaked away over the northern horizon and gone in less than a quarter of a second, just almost instantaneous movement. And it had to have been going 20, if I was going to guess, I would say 20,000 miles an hour.
This was 2005.
Yes. And it was at that point, I mean, I believed Stephen when he was telling me his stories, but, about his experiences and his UFO sightings. But I guess I believed him 95%. There's always that little 5% of doubt in your mind. But once I saw my first one, then that was the end of the doubt. And that's about when we started thinking about researching a book and writing our stories into that. And the preface of our book has our personal stories, but our research led us down some really bizarre conclusions that I know no one else seems to have exactly the same conclusions. But have you guys ever heard of the Hiawatha asteroid impact crater?
Me personally, I have not. But really quick, before Dominic answers that, are you from the Coachella Valley?
We live in the Coachella Valley now. Yes.
Oh, we do too. I don't know if you knew that,
Valley.
But yeah, we live in Palm Desert. So we live.
I saw you were in Palm Desert. I said, "Oh my God, we're neighbors."
Valley, which is where that is. It's the far east part of Desert.
Dominic, do you know? Have you heard of that? That what they said, the crater?
No, is that the one in Arizona?
Oh no, that one that was 50,000 years ago. That one.
Okay.
This is a recent find that we were expecting them to find for many years. About 25 years ago, I heard about nanodiamonds being discovered in the soil of 13,000 years ago, the Uccello horizon and the Younger Dryas boundaries. They found nanodiamonds in them, and nanodiamonds form in no other way but celestial impacts, because when a meteor or an asteroid comes through our atmosphere, it brings dust with it, and that dust superheats and forms these little round microscopic diamonds. And so we knew that the extinctions of 13,000 years ago, the mammoth was wiped out, the mastodon, the Clovis people, the American horse, the American camel, a lot of our large plains animals were all wiped out at the same time. And I was surmising that it could have been an asteroid impact or a meteor impact. And then they found the nanodiamonds, and that was the proof positive. So they continued to assume that the crater must be under the ice sheet somewhere because the nanodiamond concentration was higher up north. And they finally did discover the crater in 2016. It was under a glacier in northern Greenland, the Hiawatha Glacier. So they named it the Hiawatha Asteroid Impact Crater. And this would have caused enormous convulsions of the climate and also a 2,000-foot tsunami rushing towards the coastlines of all of the countries of the world.
Yeah, the crater was basically the size of downtown Washington, D.C., and it vaporized, would they say 15 gigatons?
1,500 gigatons.
1,500 gigatons
now,
of ice at once.
Yeah, a single gigaton is 1 billion metric tons. So 1,500 of those were would have been vaporized all at once.
Sent into the atmosphere.
And caused torrential rains worldwide, and not to mention the tsunami itself. So we believe that this is the cause of all of the flood myths in our most ancient lore. And it's one of the other reasons that human history does not precede 13,000 years in almost every case.
Apart from Göbekli Tepe, we're starting to see about 12 and a half. But the interesting thing is that the nanodiamonds were found on 4 different continents in the northern hemisphere, in at least 10 different countries so far, and it's an inch thick. And so, in other words, we knew that a huge fire was happening all at once.
Right, because the Ocello horizon is actually a layer of charcoal.
Because when a meteor or an asteroid comes through the atmosphere, it brings a lot of stuff that's on fire with it. So it basically ignites everything.
They get air bursts ahead of it too.
So that's what happens.
Catches the forest fires.
So in other words, we had the dead body. We just had to find the murderer. And so once we found in 2016, once we found the Hiawatha impact, we knew what caused it. And we know too that the Great Flood did happen.
And this was the proof that we were looking for to help bolster our theories. Our theories are that these creatures are not coming, the things flying UFOs in our skies, they are not coming from distant star systems, but are rather a branch of humanity that split off from us thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. And they kept their technology. They didn't lose it because they survived the impact with their technology intact, whereas this poor schmucks on the surface were just died in droves and were thrown back into the Stone Age to start over again.
We didn't all die. There's that genetic bottleneck that happened around 13,000 years ago, where there's the human population, according to DNA and to genome mapping, that we were reduced down to a population of about 10,000 people. So the
entire population has regenerated from those 10,000.
From those 10,000 people. It's quite fascinating. But the stuff that we found that isn't rabbit holey actually makes a heck of a lot of sense. But there's a lot of rabbit hole stuff out there you wouldn't believe.
Right. So our theory is that they separated, or basically the population of the humanity separated into 2. Those that kept their technology intact and went underground or into space to survive. And, because we think we were actually a fairly advanced race before Hiawatha hit. Maybe more advanced than we are now, a little more advanced than we are now.
Yeah, differently, for sure.
Because this never made sense to me, but for Homo sapiens sapien, human beings, we've been on this planet for at least 120,000 years. Sometimes people say older, but 120,000 years is a for sure benchmark. And mainstream archaeology would have us believe that we sat around for 107,000 years living in caves, picking fleas off our butts and freezing our nips off, and didn't get around to even inventing the house,
or the wheel, yeah.
And this never made sense to us. We're human beings, good or bad. We are an industrious, curious people. We're not going to sit around stagnant for 107,000 years. So we think that the stories about advanced cities like Atlantis were possibly true, and that we were a fairly advanced race of humans before Hiawatha hit. But Hiawatha was so devastating, it just laid us low.
And also one really quick thing just before you're going to ask, I know you got questions for us, but one other thing is that the commonality in these 1,200 different flood myths that have been unearthed throughout the past 40, 50 years, one commonality is that there is foreknowledge. There was
Yes.
foreknowledge. Wherever you look in the Bible, the Mahabharata, the Chinese text, doesn't matter where you looked, there was foreknowledge that these people were said either dig in like in Darren Kuyu.
They were warned.
They were warned. So guess what? We had enough technology at that point to either know that it's coming and we can't do anything about it or whatnot.
Right. We don't know why they couldn't stop it if they were more advanced than we are, but maybe it's just not as easy to stop them as people think. But we think this branch of humanity prior to the Hiawatha impact were the ones setting up the bases on Mars.
Possibly.
The structures on the moon that people are finding. And with the moon of Mars is Phobos. I believe
yes.
They found a structure on Phobos. We think it was just us out in the solar system setting this stuff up. And then Hiawatha laid us low. But like I said, I think now we've got a race on the surface that devolved into barbarians and cannibals. And we have a separate human race that is living underground in hollowed out cities, caverns that they dug in order to survive the Hiawatha asteroid impact. And we think that that's where they're launching their UFOs from. We keep hearing that they're the UFOs flying up out of lakes, flying up out of the ocean, flying up out of volcanoes, flying out of the sides of mountains, flying out of the sides of mesas and ridges.
Yeah, Shasta's a good example.
Yeah, these are underground bases, and we know about the underground bases in part because there's been some whistleblower testimony about it.
And the American Indians have been talking about it for thousands of years.
We have the Dulce papers too,
the Star
and
Brothers. So they have a different take on it than we do.
Yes, and as far as the Anunnaki, we're talking about a different time period now. We're talking about 300,000 years ago.
To 450.
Supposedly, the Anunnaki came on a planet that swings through this part of the solar system every 3,600 years, and
not too close to disrupt things, but
close
enough.
Yeah, well, actually, there's supposed to be climate upheavals and stuff related to the passing when it passes through the solar system, and it's supposed to be. We're at one end of the large oval elliptical shaped orbit, but the other end of it is where it circles around a brown dwarf, which is a protostar. So they're hard to spot. You can only see them on infrared telescopes.
They've been seen once in the 1980s. Actually.
Yes, this particular brown dwarf that we're talking about is in the direction of Orion, which was why we think there's so many ancient alien connections to the planet, to the constellation Orion, and the brown dwarf actually was photographed in 1986 by the IRIS telescope. The IRAS infrared telescope that was they had launched at that time, and so there is some evidence that the brown dwarf exists. Now, so it comes down to whether either the Anunnaki are
involved at all.
Yes, if the story is true, and of course Sitchin was just translating the tablets. He's not like making the stuff up, right? So these are what the Anunnaki themselves are claiming about themselves, is that they are an alien race from this other planet, and that they needed slave labor because they were after gold, and the work was too hard and the work too onerous for their own people, who actually staged a revolt 300,000 years ago. And if this is true, then what their solution to the problem was to take Homo erectus and uplift us into Homo sapien. And this is why there's a missing link of evolution there, we believe. It's because this uplifting seems to actually have taken place. There looks to be, what is the part of the brain that's affected?
Oh, it's got broken brain, Carl Sagan.
There's some evidence of tampering with our genetic model that is in that part of the speech centers.
The neocortex, actually, Jason Martell, that you may be familiar with, he did a seminar not long ago that I attended where he's quite he kind of believes like what we believe, and he was talking about how there was this evidence that there was a cut and patch job done, kind of like what we're doing with CRISPR, to the areas, to the genes. You know, we're 4 base pair as far as for our, the adenine and the cytosine, the different, basically amino acids that form our genetic, genome. So he said that according to recent research, it looks like there was a cut and paste job done about 300,000 years ago that miraculously somehow now humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, all of a sudden developed speech.
It's in the speech centers of the brain that
right. So we believe this has been tampered with. So,
and of course, if we were really uplifted, that's not likely that we uplifted ourselves. We think that this may be true. And as crazy as it all sounds, we think that may be the case.
Yes.
And then
maybe we should let them ask us some questions.
Oh, sure.
You mentioned the Younger Dryas and the impact crater. That could make a lot of sense, and because a lot of people believe that the Younger Dryas event that exploded in the atmosphere, but with evidence in Greenland, it sounds like it did impact. And that's a good
finally found it.
Yeah, that's a good reference to the giant mammoths found flash frozen with food in their mouth.
Exactly.
Precisely. Yep.
But what it doesn't account for is the ancient megalithic cities under the oceans, like one off Cuba's estimated to be 50,000 years old. And when you talk about the Anunnaki, there's an archaeologist named David Roll, and he has many books out, and he discusses these entities. They're also known as the Seven Sages, or the Apollo, the Shebtu, the Shebeti, the Rishi, the Quetzalcoatls, the Viracochas. They're basically the same entities. And when he says, because you mentioned that some of these ancient people lived a long time, and it talks about the kingship that descended from heaven in the Sumerian text. And David Roll identifies them as, because there are 8 kings. He identifies them as the 7 sages plus Satan. And this was after, let me see.
Yes, there's several Sumerian ancient stories. One is literally the expulsion of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. Eden being an actual location in Sumeria, spelled Edin, in ancient times. The Sumerians definitely have a different take on it, and their story, the Anunnaki, the story is the 2 brothers that were vying for power,
Enlil
and Enki. And Enki is associated frequently with the serpent.
Satan.
So we think that it was Enki who was facilitating the breeding between humans and Anunnaki. And Enlil felt it was a sacrilege.
It's an abomination.
And he became furious, and he expelled all of the human workers from the gardens of Mesopotamia because he was furious.
That was their take on it.
That's their take on it. And it sounds, so it's not, we're not talking about an apple. They didn't get pissed about an apple. They got pissed about this heresy of crossbreeding with the humans.
Right.
Well, yeah. The Sumerian text talk about how they developed a slave race, and they called them the Blackheads, and that's a slave race that was.
Yes, the black-haired ones.
Yeah, then you get into.
It's actually the correct translation.
Yeah. Then you get into the giants. You get into the Gigi. You get into the different various giant tribes, and I guess these are, from what I understand, these are derived from the sons of God, who are basically celestial beings, entities that seem to somehow traverse their reality into ours.
Right. And the Enki is frequently seen as the devil because after he's saved, but he's also the benefactor of mankind in the flood myths. He's the one that Enlil apparently was furious and wanted to destroy.
Tired of the noise of humanity.
And hated the noise of humanity.
Yeah.
And I think he was alarmed at how fast we breed compared to them.
Mm-hmm. How smart he made us.
Still,
and
that's still out of control.
Intelligent they were making us. And the Tower of Babylon story is Tower of Babel rather is. They also have a different take on it. Like the humans were getting too uppity, and so they knocked us down a peg. But we think that after they see Enlil, we think wanted to destroy us all, but Enki wanted to save us. So Enki is the one that warned everybody about the flood. And then after Enlil came back, after the waters had receded, and they discovered that humanity had survived to a certain extent, and it was because of Enki's interference that he may have what do you call it? Banished him. And that's where you get the fallen angel story, that he was banished to earth out of heaven, so to speak.
South of the equator.
And so we think a lot of the references to Satan in the Bible may be in reference to these ancient stories about, because a lot of the stuff in the Bible it has a Sumerian version that's, much older.
Or Babylonian. Yeah.
Yeah, or Akkadian or whatever from that area.
Well, they also talk about the Anunnaki in the Promised Land, where the sons of Enoch were giants. They were described by Joshua and Caleb and the spies, the sons of Enoch, and they were very tall apparently, and they appeared to them as grasshoppers in their sight. So that kind of sounds like a little bit of what you're talking about, these cross hybrid beings that they came down and did all this crazy stuff.
We've met and talked to Hugh Newman. You're probably familiar with his work about the giants of Great Britain, the giants of the Americas. Quite an interesting character. He's part Welsh, part British, and quite well spoke. And a lot of their research they found, it shows that for whatever reason, the giants that have been found in North America, they have double sets of teeth, double rows of teeth.
Yeah.
Whereas the ones in England, they have not found yet giants that have double rows of teeth, only single rows of teeth. And he's also done a lot of work too, going to Göbekli Tepe. He's been there a number of times, and that's the place that they say they're tracking about 12 to 13,000 years old. That looks like it was purposely buried to save the structures. So the whole thing with giants, we do know that giants did exist. As far as we're concerned, there's enough evidence for that.
And the Smithsonian, for whatever reason, collected all the evidence and destroyed it, and has hushed the stories up as much as they can possibly have done.
They haven't gotten everything, though.
They missed a few things.
What about, you guys believe in all that rabbit hole thing where there's a lot of bones found of actual, like, dragons, kind of like how dragons are in hieroglyphs and, the way they're drawn in ancient cultures. They actually find dragons like that, and they kind of hide them. Same thing with the Smithsonian. Smithsonian are hiding the dragon bones, as they say, and a lot of these dinosaurs that they find, they say, are kind of just, some of them are just kind of made up to hide the history of, like anything else. They're trying to hide dragons, because the dragons are real, proves this piece of history is real and this is real. Like, just if giants are real, it kind of disproves a lot of other things that mainstream history tries to say. Have you heard about that? The ancient dragon bones that they find?
Yes,
with the wings and everything, the whole 9 yards.
The original emperor of China, Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, who came down in a fiery dragon. Okay, that's in their lore and their myth, right? Again, we hear the things like Enoch going up into
in a fiery chariot.
The thing about Ezekiel, the wheels upon wheels coming down
in a fiery chariot.
Okay. All right, so there's a lot of commonality there. The thing with, for instance, there's this big thing going on. We actually know this guy, Will Gallison, that we met him at Contact in the Desert, and he brought this 3D printout of this little, about 2.5 foot alien that was found, mummies, these mummies that were found in Peru near, at high altitude. I forget. There's like 20 or 30 of them were found of all varying different sizes. And he was still sitting on the fence about, like, he wanted to believe they're real. He'd seen them, but some people are saying, oh, it's a llama's head, and they were doing ceremonial stuff about 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, we think they're 1,000-year-old constructs, but
they could be. But you see, they haven't raised enough money to do proper DNA testing, so it's really frustrating.
But these things couldn't have ever been alive. We looked at it very closely, and the spine, I mean, a lot of it looks like it's put together from real bones, you know what I mean? So they look like anatomically real bones, but the spines looks like they cut cross sections of a large femur. They were just like round, cross sections. And you know how our spine is. It has a lot of openings for nerves to come out of the column. So we think that the stories about them being 1,000-year-old constructs make sense.
And the neck of this being didn't have any cervical vertebrae at all. It looked like it would almost be like a snake or a turtle that would basically extend its neck. So the thing about dragons, obviously there's always the possibility, but again, I think that is kind of a stretch.
I always thought that they were people, from ancient times, they found dinosaur bones. And, assume that these things are real, that they're still walking the earth, and thought of them as dragons since then. But we don't really know if they're hiding evidence that dragons really existed or not.
If you look even back to the World War II, like the Spitfires and the different planes that are being flown, they had these shark teeth and these menacing faces on them. It's like, okay, if we wanted to play that game, we're going to play gods now. Let's say that our cousins are playing gods. That's easier because, hey, you have a population on the surface that needs to be re-educated. That's where the Veracochas come in.
That's what we think is they kind of, they were safe and sound underground, and we think they stayed there because, first of all, because of the climate upheavals on the surface caused by the impact.
1,100 years.
Would have lasted about the Younger Dryas boundary is about 1,100 years worth of soil accumulation. So they believe that the climate crisis would have meant they couldn't grow food on the surface like normal. And so we think they just stayed underground because they were comfortable. And then after a while, I think they slowly mutated into being unable to live on the surface. And but at one point, we think they took pity on humanity on the surface. They saying, okay, they're turning into barbarians, they're cannibals, so we think that all of these flood myths, almost all of them, have an ending where, okay, we survived and we were cannibals, and then a teacher showed up, Veracocha in Peru and Kukulkan in Mexico, and there's different ones for all over the world,
Ahura Mazda.
Yeah, Ahura Mazda for the Iranian area, and so we think that these people living underground took pity on humanity on the surface and came back to the surface and set themselves up as gods. And almost always a grouping of 12 gods, like the main gods of Sumeria were 12, the main gods of Greece were 12, the main gods of Egypt were 12. So we think that these gods were just essentially the advanced humans that had not lost their technology to set themselves up as rulers on the surface to help humanity climb back out of the Stone Age, essentially, and civilize us again.
As far as that city, the structure found off of Cuba, that's in over 2,000.
That's in 2,000 feet of water.
I mean, I don't know what happened there. I mean, that confounds me. I don't think that
that wouldn't have been exposed for quite a long time. It would have been thousands of years since it had been exposed.
Yeah, I mean, the ocean levels must have been radically different.
Right, but there's a lot of stuff that's just a few hundred feet under the surface, and we think, Hiawatha hit right as we're coming out of an ice age.
Right.
And so the water levels were lower because there was so much frozen water ice at the poles. But then as it began to emerged from the Ice Age, the water's levels would have risen and risen and risen and swamped a lot of cities that had before that had been exposed to the air.
But what would happen?
But Hiawatha would have just
Hiawatha would have been all those gigatons that were thrown up to turn liquid water. If you introduce, that's what they're really worried about Greenland, about too much liquid water, being not salt water being introduced into basically
the Labrador Sea.
Yeah, basically the conveyor belt of the Atlantic Ocean, which
the currents
when you shut down those currents, then basically England's going to be back, become completely become a glacier. That's what's going to happen. You have to have that conveyor belt of the hot water and the cold water intermixing.
Right.
And that's a big problem.
But we believe that any of the low-lying coastal communities would have been destroyed by Hiawatha. In fact, we agree with the supposition that they've discovered Atlantis under the Doñana National Park bird sanctuary just up the coast of Spain, just up from the Rock of Gibraltar. They did some ground penetrating radar work and have discovered that there are concentric rings there. And also just out of the ocean, just out of the mouth of the delta is a debris field of large cut stones that just look exactly like what would happen if a tsunami covered a city and then pulled most of it back out into the ocean, which is what we think happened with Atlantis.
And the cool thing is that Atlantis is where Plato said it was going to be found.
And that's one of the reasons we like this theory, is because it is right where Plato said it was supposed to be. So for once, it's not a continent way out on the other side of the world.
Just like Troy was exactly where Homer said it would be found. So it's interesting stuff for sure.
And these ancient cities, they were supposed to be advanced. They were supposed to have flying cars and
they were advanced for sure.
Golden pyramids and
they knew how to work with stone more than we do at this point.
What's that carbendium or the
carborundum?
Carborundum, that metal that was supposed to be.
You're talking about orichalcum.
Oh, that's it. Orichalcum. That's supposed to be an Atlantean metal that they had on a lot of their cities.
It's mostly zinc and copper with a couple other elements.
And then it was actually.
They found
Plato talks about it, and then an ancient ship was actually found to have some of this metal on it.
Yes, it was. Yeah,
pointing to it, but we don't. We can't know for sure if this was Atlantis or not. But for one thing, we do know if it was there 13,000 years ago, it was at ground zero for a tsunami from the Hiawatha impact for sure.
Right.
It would have been just terrible.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It would have been just terrible.
Absolutely. What's your shifting gears? What's your take on cattle mutilations? What do you think why is this happening? Yeah. Why are they doing this? Why are they taking the sex organs and the eyeballs?
People, right?
Yeah, we definitely cover that in the book for sure. And I want to also interject here about one thing that we cover in one of the chapters of our book is about just how frequently asteroid impacts occur, and they're a lot more frequent than people would think.
Right.
So
there's the one in Arizona 50,000 years ago, but there was one in India 50,000 years ago as well. And this is still in this 107,000 year time period that we're talking about, where humanity had advanced. And it's possible that after the crater was formed in India, that maybe that they realized they would have to, if they wanted to survive for any long period of time, they would have to have some underground sort of, I call them arcs, underground arcs that they maybe installed a very long time ago and were able to basically save a big portion of their population. But let's talk about the
cattle mutilation.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The abduction phenomenon, as soon as we started researching it, we discovered that it was almost entirely a Caucasian phenomenon, about 95%. And so it couldn't be what the theories were saying, that it was, oh, they're just curious about us. They want samples, a cross-section of humanity. But it couldn't be that. And also they kept taking the same person again and again and again, and then started taking their children, and then started taking their grandchildren. So we think that they're after a specific line of genetic DNA. And we believe it's because that was what their DNA was, and they are needing it for either their breeding programs or for perhaps their populations become less viable living underground, and they need to infuse it regularly with surface DNA. But we think that when Hiawatha struck, they also took a lot of animals down below to help them survive. We think that they took domesticated animals mostly, but probably maybe cross-samplings of genetics of wild animals too, to help repopulate populate some of the animal species. There's this story about Admiral Byrd seeing a mammoth when he visited the underworld of the Ariane under the ice sheet of Atlantis. But we think that maybe they're doing the same thing in that their cattle have become they have cattle down below as a food source, and we think that maybe they're becoming less viable living underground and need regular infusions of surface DNA as well. They always exsanguinate the blood, and they take the sex organs of the animals, and it's surgical precision. But we've also heard of wild animals being, to a much lesser degree, they also do the same thing to wild animals, but mostly it's cattle, sheep, horses, goats, mostly the animals of man, and basically our main food sources.
We interviewed somebody a while back, and he was been abducted a lot of times, and including his girlfriend, I believe, at one time. This guy has a crazy abduction story, even to the point where he drew through this portal that was made of like some kind of gelatin door, kind of like Stargate, and everything was slowing down. But anyways, one of the things that stuck out to me when we're talking about is that when he was on one of these ships, he said there was a bunch of people on board that were kidnapped there too. And he said there was a creature there that looked like it was like an experiment, that there were like a hybrid program. Sorry. And It looked like some of the creatures were going through a phase of testing, and some were good to go, I guess. But one, he said it looked like a pig, or the color of a pig, pink skin, looked like a human face with like an animal body. And instead it looked like it was suffering, like it was just like it was made, but it just didn't, everything didn't go together right. So it was like just there looking like grotesque. And I thought that was very creepy, and just very sad for something to have to live like that, you know. So it's pretty much something they made, and it just didn't go well.
Yeah, this one didn't work out so well.
Yeah, something from Total Recall, you know.
Even back in the late 50s, early 60s, there was a Soviet doctor, and there's a video you can see on YouTube.
Oh yeah, where he's combining
he basically
two heads on a dog.
Made a two-headed dog, and it lived for like about an hour or maybe 60.
It didn't look happy.
It was so he's just trying to see if he could actually do a transplant. And you look at the pantheon of Sumeria and Babylonia and Egypt especially.
They show a lot of like hybrid things, like a dogs with a human head on them, and they've got a collar with a chain, like they're pets, or something.
It's figurative or literative, or literal.
I'm looking at it right now. I just pulled it up. The two-headed dog. You said Russian, right? Vladimir Demakov, something like that. Wow.
Russian guy, it's like really.
Yeah, there's a real. Yeah, it's definitely real. I'm looking at the whole thing right here. Wow. It looks very. The other head, it looks very like it's not even there, like it's just brain dead, but it's alive. Yeah. Sad,
but then as we continued researching the abduction phenomenon, we discovered that the thing where they're taking babies from women, they take most of our research was through the books of Professor David M. Jacobs. He did 10,000 alien abduction regressions, hypnotic regressions. And of those 10,000, 1,100 of them were women who claimed to have been taken and impregnated. And then 4 months later, are taken again, and the baby is stolen. The fetus is stolen. And there's been some, hard evidence of this, because ultrasounds proving the pregnancy to be there, and then further ultrasounds showing that not only did she not miscarry, that the womb has been entirely vacuumed out.
It looks like she was never ever pregnant in the first place.
Right. And then we also know about the Dulce papers. Make me think that this is what they're doing with the fetuses. The Dulce papers were the Dulce Air Force Base, and it's called in ufology circles,
New Mexico.
It's a secret underground base, and the 7 levels deep, going about 2 miles underground, and the bottom 2 levels are supposed to be alien and U.S. military run, and the upper 5 levels are just U.S. military. So they keep the 2 levels at the bottom secret. But one time the security guard went down into the lower levels, and he wasn't supposed to go. And he discovered that there were hundreds and hundreds of these vats where they were growing hybrid beings or grays. And these vats, I believe, is where they're taking the fetuses to finish developing in. And that's why they're doing it. We believe it's actually a reintegration program of theirs and an infiltration program of theirs. You see, they didn't get what they wanted. They started making themselves known to us again after World War II, or in World War II, when the Foo Fighters started following our planes everywhere.
Everybody's planes.
Everybody's planes. And after the use of the nuclear weapons, I believe since they live here too, we think they were quite alarmed at us having nuclear weapons. And they said as much to Admiral Byrd in a meeting they had with him. They said, now that we normally don't have anything to do with you barbarians on the surface, we normally just let you have your wars and ignore you. But now that you have, the power of the atom, we can't let that, this is not for you, they were saying, and he kept calling him my son, like they're our fathers or our masters or something like that.
He's a tall white guy,
our caregivers. Tall,
older looking white guy with silvery hair that had a slightly Germanic accent.
And we're talking about a man again here, so many of the aliens are described as indistinguishable from humans. Nordics look like tall Swedes and are indistinguishable from tall humanoid Swedes, right? And grays, to me, the gray alien looks like a human being that you've put underground for 10,000 years. And we have more in common physically with the grays than we do with our closest relative on the planet, the bonobo chimps.
Right.
If you look at the skeletal structure, it's basically the same proportions as us. And what would happen to a human if you put it underground for 10,000 years? We'd get grayer, smaller, our eyes would get blacker and larger,
less hair,
and we'd have no need for hair any longer. And we think that is a sign that these are not coming from distant star systems. These are races that have evolved right here. They're even described as having kind of atrophied breasts with nipples. That means they're mammals, that they evolved here with us, not on Alpha Centauri or somewhere else.
And with the cattle mutilations, you got to look at the motivation. There's necessity. They have a need. It's not research and development. And what we also found too in our research was that the whole mythos of vampires and the succubus and the incubus, you can see a lot of commonalities there.
With the alien abduction phenomenon.
They come in the night. They're very powerful. They paralyze you. They take your blood, take your DNA.
Take DNA.
Have sex with you sometimes, and and then they can shapeshift too.
And then the incubus and
almost immortal too.
The succubus is more like the alien breeding program, where the pregnancies from the Middle Ages, women would describe an incubus coming and having sex with them, and then they'd be pregnant. And then when it was time to give birth, they would give birth to nothing but air. And this sounds just like the abduction phenomenon, where they're taking women, impregnating them, stealing the babies, and then they are not giving birth to a baby at the end of the pregnancy. They're giving birth to a whoosh of air because there's nothing else in there anymore.
Mm-hmm. I think on the Greys, I think Whitley Strieber said it the best when he was taken. He says he saw nothing but these gray suits. They were just suits, and the theory is they're embodied by some type of spirit. They're animated. The suit is some sort of AI technology. Yeah. However, when we interviewed Karen Wilkinson, who was taken, she describes the small grays as robotic, emotionless,
automatons.
Yeah, automatons. Yet, however, there is a bigger gray race that's tall, that these seem to be organic, that these little grays, little drones are made after them. And then she says she saw the praying mantis type, and she saw in a hallway tanks, vats of fetuses growing in different stages.
Yeah, kind of like what's that movie called again?
Matrix.
The Matrix. Yeah, just like that. And they all, in these gray aliens, whether they're the tall ones or the little ones, they don't have any sex organs or reproductive things to put anything in or anything to come out. You know, there's no digestive system. There's no, you know, there's no anus. Right. There's no vagina. Right. There's no penis. So that's a mystery too.
We think that they could be a constructed slave race as well. Yeah. And, you know, because we think that the Anunnaki, which we think maybe are kind of in charge of the Nordic aliens or are representatives of them, the Nordic aliens representatives or the priest class, still running things for them. But I'm sorry, what was I going to say?
No, they found that human beings don't make good slaves.
Right,
basically.
That's it.
We're noisy, we're restless,
and we start to think for ourselves.
That is known.
And we rebel. We think for ourselves, and we start to create our own our own stories. We start going off on another path.
Right. We have a lot of free will, and we just don't make good slaves. We chomp at the bit and chafe at the yoke.
And we're still all dealing with the 7 deadly sins. Greed, gluttony, lust, vanity, pride, wrath, and sloth.
Okay, yeah, we have that in spades.
If we're made in their image, guess what? They're probably dealing with similar things themselves.
Yes, well, our stories from the translations from Sitchin show that these gods are just as bad. They're just as bad. They have all of the sins themselves, all the deadly sins. The Anunnaki, which of course are false gods. They pretended to be gods, but they're not. If we're looking at the God that made everything in the universe and made the Anunnaki too. So these creatures are, I think they were playing God for a long, long time because that was a way to control us. But we think now that we're too sophisticated for the playing God thing to work, and now they're playing space alien. They're pretending to be, for instance, do you remember the story about Valiant Thor visiting the White House? Yeah. He landed in a spaceship in a Virginian field in Virginia and demanded to be taken to the president. And instead, they took him to the Pentagon, and he lived there for 3 years and was a consultant. First of all, he was, again, a man, a Caucasian red-haired man, and he said he was from Venus. And, of course, now we know that Venus is a lifeless hellhole, except for maybe the extremophile bacterias or those little bacterias that can live anywhere. But except for that, so he's lying, right? So where is he really coming from? And we think he's coming from under our feet. Mm-hmm. And that
it's easier to think about having an enemy coming from above than one living under your feet.
And we think
they're very xenophobic.
And we think in the 40s that Truman and then Eisenhower after him discovered they discovered the existence of these beings and decided to try and continue to keep their secret. And we think they made actually a few meetings between Eisenhower and Nordic aliens, so essentially men, that met with Eisenhower. And the one thing that they wanted us to do was to denuclearize. And that it was the one thing we refused to do. Mm-hmm. But we did make a pact where we think the government made a pact with them to continue keeping their secret. The government didn't want it out anyway. It's not really good news to the world to saying, hey, we're actually the stupid ones on the planet. And the brilliant ones live underneath our feet. And to a certain extent, try and exert control over us now. And we believe it's because they didn't get what they wanted, the nuclear denuclearization, that's why they're continuing to follow our military whenever they go out on maneuvers. They're essentially keeping eyes on all of our nukes at all times so that we don't blow up the world and kill everybody and them too. And poison the surface, which would eventually poison the underworld as well.
Right. Well, there's a lot of talk of civilizations in the inner earth now, even today. And
yes.
When you do the research on people want to call them extraterrestrials, I'm with you on that. I don't think they come from Zeta Reticuli. I think they're just right here. Yep. There was a high level government group that researched this phenomenon. They were called the Collins Elite, and they came up with their final analysis. It says that these are demonic in nature, and basically they warned about communicating with this phenomenon. And this is a high level government faction that did a study on this during the time of I think Jacobs. So that was really impacting when you heard that report from the Collins Elite, super top secret group.
Well, we think the demonic stories grew from the alien abduction. It's it's a chicken and an egg thing.
Well, that goes back to the Irish. Yeah, that goes back to the
behaving like demons.
That goes back to the Irish. Yeah, the Irish when they were taken back then, they wanted to call them Yeah, and they would take them for a fortnight. And it sounds like an alien abduction, right? When you look at the
exactly.
the Celtic beliefs, and it's all over the world. It's not just them. It's the Native Americans call them the Sky People,
or the Ant People, the Anunnaki sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes, and the Ant People. When the Hopi were their flood myth talks about the Ant People took them underground mm-hmm. and taught them how to grow a type of food underground. And that's how that's how the Hopi survived. And yes, they did call them ant people. And ironically, the word ant people is pronounced Anunnaki in Hopi.
Yes, very, very similar.
Yeah.
The thing goes with the demons. I hear what you're saying in this group. It would also be very convenient because number one, we look how many Catholics there are in different religious groups, to Buddhists, doesn't matter where you're looking at. But when you call something a demon, it also puts another level between thinking of them as being human like us. It's kind of puts another scare level. So I'm always suspicious about disinformation, no matter if it comes from a high level, because I got to look at what their motivation is. So that I'm not familiar with that, but I'm interested to hear.
I would like to. So we interviewed someone, high level or not. His name is Dr. Richard Gallagher. He is a psychiatrist of many years and never believed in any kind of religious kind of spirituality, demonic in nature. He has a book out. What's it called?
Demonic Foes.
Demonic Foes. You could check it out. We had him on the show, and he said he was approached by someone from the church, the Catholic Church, one of these exorcist people. And I guess through their process, they can't just go around doing exorcism. They have to do a test, and one of these tests is these people who are supposedly possessed. One of the tests is if they know languages or ancient languages or they know written languages or stuff like that. That's the test number one if they know this. And yeah, you can say they probably study it, but I mean, what are the chances of someone knowing like 20, 30 different languages? A teenage kid, right? And writing it down perfect word for word. And then the second one is them knowing things about you that it's impossible for them to know. Like, let's just say I just met you right now and you, and I know how someone died in your family, exactly how it happened, when it happened, or I know a secret that your husband told you that no one else should know. So things like that, they do tests, right? So with that being said, those, you know, some of the tests that they do to it be worth for them to go do this, you know, exorcism. So they brought Dr. Richard Gallagher, who didn't believe in anything, for a reason, to see what his opinion was. And his opinion basically came down to was there was a lot of things that I could not rule out as schizophrenia or this and that, because he was seeing things that he couldn't explain, like levitation, speaking different and older languages, the patient knowing things about him that no one could possibly ever know. And with that being said, I do know in the Bible that there is a verse that says Jesus gave us power over demonic entities to cast them out. So another thing too, whether they're aliens or not, there's definitely some kind of fear that these entities have of the name of Jesus, because when they do speak that name, they do cower, and things do happen in different various ways, such as the possession completely leaving, or the entity getting more mad by hearing the name. No other name bothers these entities but the name Jesus, which is, whether you believe in Jesus or not, that is a fact that's going on around the world. So that's something that I would like to know from your guys' opinion or standpoint, how that's happening, just the name of Christ. A lot of abductions also been stopped with the name of Christ too. So there's definitely some kind of power to the name. Whether all this technology they have, all these things they have, they're still cowered to a name. So that's something I always thought about that was interesting.
I personally believe, and we've watched enough stuff and read enough stuff over the years, that exorcisms are real, and there are, you know, in Italy, they definitely take this stuff seriously, and even in the United States, and these events do occur, and they're, quite honestly, as far as the demonic levels, I'm sure there are different levels of frequency. For instance, as an example, my mom, she practiced automatic writing, as did her mother and her mother's sister and the grandparents in England. And my grandmother could do it in two different languages. One was Arabic, and she didn't even know the language. But for instance, I remember clearly my mom picking me up from school when I was 9, and she was crying her eyes out. I said, Mommy, what's wrong? I said, my mother just died in England. I said, oh, did you get a call? She said, no. I got this feeling, it came over me, and I automatic wrote, and she showed it to me, and about a day or two later, we got a call from England telling her that her mother died. Same thing when her father died, same thing when Uncle Clifford died. And I personally read things that I wasn't supposed to read about my uncle and other people that she knew about them health-wise and other stuff that we did not know. So I think there's different ways of like, for instance, like we're in a beta wave right now. We're doing about 40 brainwave cycles per second, but we know that there's, you know, theta, and there's REM, and there's delta, you know, alpha states. So we know that with different cycles per second puts us in a different state of reality. And I think some people do have the ability to tune into different frequencies more than others. Yeah. Like let's just say we're listening to 97.1 right now, but let's say a couple of us out there can also listen to 97.3 and 96.9. And, you know, it's like, also too, the other problem is when you don't have people to talk to about this, they literally think that you're nuts, that you're hearing voices, or that you have clear audience going on. It's not like you have a lot of people. It's like the same thing that happens with geniuses. I mean, how many people could Tesla talk to, and other geniuses that have been around that, you know, it's like they're just basically living on a different level. It's just, you know, the great musicians, Mozart, a lot of them, chess masters, they go nuts sometimes.
We think there is a psychic component to who they're choosing as far as to take. And we think this is because they themselves are psychic. Mm-hmm. We believe, you know, this was something we practiced ourselves. We went to work with the chanting and the Kundalini raising practices for a while. About 2 years we were involved with it, opening our chakras and chanting and doing the meditation work necessary. And we began astral projecting regularly. And we think, and Steve's family is a very psychic bunch of people, and we think that is one of the reasons that they target them. You see, as we did the work, we became more and more psychic and more telepathic. And that's one thing we know about the Greys, is they communicate telepathically. And we actually think that telepathy and these powers, they're actually a birthright of humanity that has atrophied in us, but not atrophied in them, because they keep it up as a regular practice. Then this knowledge was lost to us when we were separated. And like I myself have had an experience where I spoke in tongues. I was kind of doing, well, I admit it. I was a young person. I was 16, and I was experimenting with drugs back then. It was all the thing. And I had taken LSD, and although not that day, but I had taken it earlier in that week. And I believe that it opened me up to the experience. But I was sitting around with friends, and I suddenly felt my consciousness like pushed down. And to me, it just felt like I was pushed down into sleep. And my friends say that when this happened to me, that I started speaking like a man in an Arabic language. It sounded like an Arabic. He didn't know what language it was, but like maybe ancient Babylonian or whatever. And then I kind of woke up again. I felt like I was coming up out of a sleep again, and they were all staring at me like I had spots all over my face or something. But that was a very bizarre experience. We think that they are just on the other side of the psychic threshold. For instance, we think they don't physically take Stephen anymore. We're not sure, but we don't think so. But they still harass him whenever he goes to sleep.
I'm still having things happen to me this day.
Yeah.
But to juxtapose upon what Leslie said, when I was her age, up until pretty much for most of my life, when I was her age, I was like as pure as the driven snow. My parents barely allowed me to drink. I didn't do pot, didn't do any drugs. Didn't have a girlfriend, was very chaste, okay? And for me, astral projection was easy. It almost came naturally. I read this book called The Art of Astral Projection by Harold Lorraine, I believe his name was. And I just practiced it once, and I got out of my body the first time. It was on a Sunday afternoon, and I was reading not the Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, and I was finding it kind of boring. So I really liked the Lord of the Rings much better. So anyways, I was kind of tired, so I put the book aside, and I was laying on my parents' bed, and I just felt really, really relaxed. And then I kind of woke up and thought, oh, I feel really relaxed. I said, oh, I'm supposed to get out of my body. So I just popped out of my body up to the ceiling by the ceiling fan. And then I thought, oh, cool. I'm going to go into the living room and see what my parents are talking about and prove to them that I'm astral projecting, because there was no way I could know what they're talking, what they're doing. So I start floating down the hallway feet first, and then I guess because I was thinking, well, maybe I should look at my body, and I try and turn to look at my body, and I feel this vibrating in my astral body, and then I feel like somebody's got me on a fishing line.
Yeah, it pulls you back in.
Oh yeah, the fishing line
through like thick mud, and then I pop back in my body, and then it's for like the rest of that day. I kind of feel like I'm not totally connected back together somehow, and
he gave me that same book, and I read just chapter 1, and that very night I popped out too for the first time. Yeah, it was a really good book. And with me though, I popped out, and suddenly I was looking at the cottage cheese ceiling only a few inches away from my face, and I said, wow, and shot right back into my body, slammed back in, and I jumped in the bed, because it's actually harder to stay out than it is to, for beginners to stay out of the body. But with me, astral projection was fun. I went snorkeling. I went scuba diving on it, and I visited the pyramids. But for Stephen, it seems like there's always an entity on the other side waiting to harass him or attack him. And it's like they're just on the other side of the veil, and they never quite leave alone the people that they show interest in.
It doesn't happen every time. For instance, about 3 weeks ago, I had to go to the bathroom. It was, I had to go pee. About 5 o'clock in the morning, I was sleeping in the bed by myself, and I just popped out of my body. I didn't realize I just popped right out of my body. Just walked over to the door, and I couldn't open the door. I says, what's going on? How was the door so hard to open? Then I realized that I turned around. I turned around and walked back over, and I looked at myself and said, oh no, did I just die or something? And so I'm trying to wake myself up and said, oh, I better get back in my body. So I just got back in my body, and then I was able to actually open the door. But it was these things, and also too, I still get approached by entities. I've had
all the time.
I go to places that I just met this. Well, I don't know how far I want to go on this, but I just wrote this one down that happened just a few days ago. I went in the astral realm. It's always the twilight for me. Always delighting is twilight.
Yes.
And I went to this place, and there was this red-haired woman, kind of tall, white, that was teaching this class, like I was in an auditorium, like in a college, and she told us her name, and her name was Ama Anush Aman Zarathustra. And I thought, did I get that right? She said, yes, that's my name. I said, you need to go to the library and check out some information. So I went to the library, and I did some other things and saw these fantastic things. So I thought, I got to remember that name. So when I woke up, I said, Leslie, do you have a pencil and a piece of paper? So she got me. It says, I got to remember this so I can't forget it. And it was just as clear as day. I said, if I hadn't written it down, I would not have remembered it. But some people think, oh, you're just you're very, very, you're a very, very creative dreamer. Well, I had dreams about you. I've had a repeating dream about UFOs. It always starts with a hum throughout my life. Mm-hmm. And it'll start up where I'm in twilight again, looking up at the sky, sometimes with people, sometimes with not. And there'd be first a UFO goes by. Looks more kind of like one of our modified planes, and then it gets more changes into more of the typical UFO shape. The last one that I had was a few months ago, and it actually landed, and this being came out of the UFO, and I was conversing with it, and I was talking to some friends. Says, is this really happening? Are you seeing the same thing too? I said, yes, we're seeing the same thing. And so I was convinced that it was actually happening. It was amazing. And by the way, I do not suffer from sleep paralysis. Okay, yeah. So some people say sleep paralysis, and but that is not the case.
And then a few months ago, you woke up and found that there was a black being with yellow eyes in the room with him.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's creepy.
Yeah, that's creepy.
And then the other night, this is only about it's not too long ago, I got into bed, and I felt like Leslie got in bed next to me, and it wasn't her because I knew she was still watching TV. And I said, okay, what do you want? And so I rolled over, just tried to ignore it. And I woke up again my usual time, and I was going to get out of bed, just relaxing, and something said in my right ear, in like a Asian voice, said, husband. And it wasn't inside my head. It was like this, something that said in my ear, husband.
Wide awake,
which,
too.
Okay, all right, that's pretty weird. But it's like this stuff has plagued me my whole life. Many times I've been ready to go to sleep, and behind me on the wall will always be a
loud knock. Yeah.
I haven't had that in
it's
the
always
past
in
few
threes.
years. Always in threes.
It's crazy.
And or it'd be like a door slamming or plate glass crashing or something like that. And then, Leslie started with these practices. She started getting clairaudience, where she'd hear a person talking right behind her and there's nobody there.
And that creeped me out enough to where I stopped doing the practice. These practices and these kind of abilities that you gain when you do them they don't really fit into the American world, the 21st century American world very well. And the idea of voices, hearing voices right behind me in the waking state was enough to creep me out, and I stopped doing it. And then I slowly lost the ability to astral project, where Stephen did not lose it. He's continued to have it.
I've had it pretty much my whole life. So.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's a lot. That's a lot going on there. Oh, when you astral playing, what do you see? Other than, other places, you see
other people astral planing?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I interact with people.
What do they look like?
I get the full thing, to touch, to feel.
Are they
sound.
Glowing?
What's that?
Because I heard they glow.
They do have a slight aura, shimmeriness about them.
I heard it's
the one time I saw another person was I was scuba diving because I like doing that when I'm astral because I can't drown or be eaten by a shark. And so I was coming up out of the ocean, and I saw a woman also coming up out of the ocean, and she was looking at me. And astral people, they look like kind of like this.
Oh wow! I don't know if I'd be scared or not. It'll freak me out.
Radiating happiness, like way too happy. You know what I mean?
So I heard this is pretty interesting. I read some books like from like I forgot what the book's called. I think it's called the Shaman and the City Under the Sea. It's about it's a real apparently it's a true story about a man in Africa, and his family comes from a generation of shamans, and he was saying that a lot of the shooting stars you see, some of them are not shooting stars. They're people astral projecting, zipping across the sky. Oh. And I guess, this guy's a shaman. He astral project all the time. And it's called the City Under the Sea because he would astral project, and there was this whole ancient spiritual city under the sea that was highly advanced and all kinds of technology. The city was made of crystals, and it was beautiful with lights, laser light, but it was like a futuristic place, like cyberpunk type of place underwater that you can only get to in your spiritual body. You got to check out that book. It's called The Shaman and the City Under the Sea.
Thank you. Let me write it down.
Yeah. The last one of the other times that I went astral projecting within the last 10 years, I decided I wanted to see Los Angeles at nighttime because it was night. So I was just floating over, basically, just like Superman type of thing. And I went through the San Fernando Valley and saw the lights in the houses. And that was one of the nicer ones because I didn't have anything, harassing me or attacking me. But sometimes they can be pretty scary for me. It's, you're supposed to, if you're being harassed, you're supposed to either jump, or you're supposed to either look at your palms of your hands and say, "Dream, be gone." That's what Carlos Castaneda used to do, apparently. Mm-hmm. I have done that a couple of times, and you can actually take over the control of the dream to become like lucid dreaming, or then you come back right into your room. It's really interesting.
Because you can, a lot of times whenever you're dreaming, you are astral. The astral body hovers above the physical body in the dream state. And, but it's kind of wrapped in a cocoon of the dream. They can't see outside the dream. And it is possible to wake up inside the dream. Like, for instance, if you're dreaming along and you see your Aunt Zelda who's dead, right? Now you're dreaming. And if you have a consciousness enough to realize that you're dreaming, you can order the dream to vanish and you'll wake up. I mean, not literally wake. You'll be you're still in your astral body, but you'll be in your room floating above your physical body. And now you have the power to go anywhere you want, when you want. And it's an intoxicating thing, but the astral body is a very emotional body. So it's hard to give it orders and commands in advance. Like I always wanted to just go to the ocean and dive in. That was, I never had any rational ideas about, going to find out secret information or, like how they try and use astral projectors now in the military.
Yeah, she keeps on wanting me to go to the Black Pyramid in Alaska.
Yeah, you can still do it, right?
I don't have that much discipline, I mean, for me, sometimes it's just so much fun, and when I sometimes I say, one time I saw these two friends of mine that were American Indians, this tall couple. I mean, he's 6'8" and she's like 6'5", right? I forget their names now, but this is like 30 years ago, and they're really good friends with us. And I was in a dream, and I saw him pushing her in a shopping cart in a store, and I said to myself, well, that can't be true. That's not happening. So then I just looked at my hands, and I gained control of it. Said this is a dream. This is not happening. So then
and you can have fun with lucid dreaming too. You don't have to. You can then control the dream and go wherever you want, do whatever you want in your dream, lucid dreaming. Good. Or if you have enough consciousness to realize you're dreaming, you can just order it gone. Say, "Dream, be gone," and it wafts away like a picture that just dissolves in front of you.
And you always give mental commands. You don't try and move your physical body. You use the mental part.
That's at the beginning.
Right.
In the beginning, beginners who are astral, they try and physically move. And it moves the body, and then you'll slam back in. But after a while, but at the beginning, you can give it commands, mental commands, and it'll go here and it'll go there. But after a practice and doing it for a while, you can start to feel the difference between the astral body and the physical body and move the astral body by itself.
Yeah, just like riding a bike.
Yeah. It takes a little practice, though. But anyway, we think this is a criteria of why the aliens abduct people too, is certain people, is they're looking for people that are maybe somewhat spiritually open or spiritually advanced, or psychic.
So we're coming close to the end of the show. Just really quick, do you have any more last thoughts on anything that you want to talk about or say? Like maybe you have a little story that you forgot to tell. One of the excited.
We definitely want to make sure that people know about our book.
Absolutely. Plug us in with everything. Go ahead.
It's Who They Are and What They're Up To by Leslie and Stephen Shaw, available on Amazon and Ingram. And I'm also setting up an Instagram page trying to put other people's experiences on and make posts of experiences that I've heard of or just some educational stuff. And that handle is at leslie.shaw.author. And we have a website, whotheyarebook.com. And you can see excerpts there, and we have some blogs too.
Yeah, we have one last little thing. We're working with two people up here in this area, one in the Joshua Tree area, one in Flamingo Heights, and they have some very interesting and actually some ring camera evidence, and also one lady, her crystals and her rocks seem to be growing around her.
Mm-hmm. She's an abductee too.
She's an abductee. She's in contact with this grayish-looking, bluish, grayish-looking taller being called Sumi, who still stays in contact with her. And this other lady has got some wild stuff she's caught on her ring camera.
Yeah.
We're working on both those right now as far as.
Yeah, we'll be making posts on those very soon. Yeah,
reels, posts, and we're maybe in our next book we'll include that.
Yes, we'll be covering that as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. Don't hang up just yet. We're just going to close out the show, and I want to just give you some little more get a little more information, so maybe I can share you on my Instagram and stuff like that. But
thank you. Yes.
Other than that, thank you for coming on. It was a great show, very interesting. A lot of stuff I learned about, definitely with the astral projecting, and I never heard about that astral you're talking about. So thank you for letting us know about that. And you are also not too far away from us. If you're looking for UFOs, you're gonna see a lot of them out here. I mean, so that being said, I think
we're on a ley line.
Oh yeah. With that being said, thank you for listening, everybody. Sabbath at midnight, and we'll talk to you guys soon.